I want to talk about mercy. I want to talk about this idea that people that lead a terrible life for their existence here on earth, that they somehow deserve eternal torment for all of eternity. Well, for one, these people that are not living a life in accordance with virtue and not living a life of love and selflessness, for the 100 years they're here, they are suffering. So that existence that we say deserves more suffering, I would argue actually deserves love and mercy. Because for those of us that understand love, for those of us that live a life of selflessness and virtue and serving others and community, we're living a great life here. And so rather than this idea that these people that lead this evil life here deserve more suffering, we should be looking at that life that they live, see the suffering that they lived, and be willing nothing other than rehabilitation for them and support and growth in an afterlife. So when those people pass away, they should be sat down in a rehabilitation center in the spiritual realm with the force of love, God, forgiveness, mercy, and that omnipotent God that has all the power should devote all of it to helping those confused souls. Because for anyone that lives an entire life here on earth, not with actions that are not in their best interest, again, they're living a life that leads to suffering throughout their entire life. We should have mercy, and those people should be the victims that they are of their own poor decisions. We shouldn't be looking at them and say, yeah, they definitely deserve hell forever. I don't understand where the mercy is there. That's not merciful. Now, I get it. We're not all powerful, but God is. So he should do that. But I think the problem is we have this appeal to authority. We look at these ancient texts and the church fathers, and we just accept that, that it must be that way. But what if it's not? What if the beauty of the design of this realm played out that way for so long, for the experience of that, only for us to get to this point in time where we graduate from that? The Bible talks about a great falling away. It talks about how there will be that falling away from the faith. Well, what if it means that we fall away from Jesus' true message? What if that original message of Jesus after he was crucified was distorted, suppressed, and the churches that led humanity for thousands of years got it wrong? If that were the case, to me, that's more in line with the prophecy of the Bible, that there would definitively be this falling away. Why? Because his original message was silenced. And then if you look at this like a grand stage play, well then there's even more beauty there in that at the climax of the stage play, the end of the age, you're going to have what we have been taught by the authorities. We're going to find out that, you know what, it was actually 99 truths and one great lie. And that great lie is that we are separate from God, we are judged by God, we are not eternal and not divine souls just by our very nature. And so they promote all this virtue and all this stuff, but they hold back our divinity. And in doing so, we, according to their teachings, live for thousands of years condemning each other, going to war with each other, and judging each other based on what is really a lie, which is this idea that any one true belief in God in the prescribed way of understanding it is what matters in life. You know, they tell you if you're not Christian, there is no salvation outside of Christ. You're definitely going to hell. Or worse yet, if you're Catholic, there's no salvation outside the Catholic Church. So you must submit and proclaim that you believe the mainstream narrative, and that's what matters. Well, that's where we get this idea that we shouldn't have mercy for those amongst us that have suffered their entire life. That's where we get the idea of separation from the Creator, which to me, if God is an all-loving, merciful, and forgiving God that is all-powerful, well, when the people that suffer their whole life here pass away, they're the ones that should be sat down in a room and immediately they should have God and the force of God and all of his wisdom. They should be in a rehabilitation center in the spiritual realm. If God has mercy, then that person that suffered for 100 years needs rehabilitation. They don't need abandonment. And yet we're told that they get abandonment. And that's what has conditioned us for thousands of years to be able to confidently say to each other, oh, well, if you don't believe this text or these church fathers, then you're going to go there. So there's this fear that's built into the religion that is so powerful that you will go against what our basic understanding of love and mercy and forgiveness is, because these texts tell us we must condemn them. And so in creating religions with that idea, we are robbing people of the experience of what true mercy is, and it leads to a never-ending debate on who's going to heaven and who's going to hell, when in reality that debate of who's going to heaven and who's going to hell shouldn't even exist. The idea that, well, let's just say this, when you live a life here, it's safe to say that there are consequences for your actions. And if you lead a super terrible life here, for one, you've suffered this entire time. But what that means is you should have to relive that in an afterlife, and you should have to sit down in a rehabilitative situation where God, the God of love and mercy, works with you to improve the state of your soul to eventually bring you back to God, which, ironically, that's what God supposedly wills for all of us, that we all return in union with him. And so I think as this relates to our world, I think that we're waking up to the reality that we would be better off living as one wholesome family in accordance in lives according to virtue and serving each other and the communal living way of life. We would be better off living in that way of life without the idea of separation and judgment and what these ancient texts and church fathers have told us we must believe. We'd be better off living like that, and it would lead to a world that looked better than the world that we currently live in. And so how do we get to that point? Well, the only way we're going to get to that point is if we get rid of this idea that we must accept the mainstream narrative that was derived from these texts at whatever point in time they were derived. That has led to all of this war and division and judgment and condemnation. Well, how do we get to that point? Well, we're going to have to at some point just accept that our understanding of those texts, not 100%. I'm not here to say that the Bible doesn't have truth and, all religions don't have some element of truth. What I'm saying is that we should be critical thinkers. We should accept that we have brains. We can determine the future of humanity. We have that ability, although we've been told that we don't, and that we need an intermediary between us and God. We need church, even though that church tells us that we need to judge each other and condemn each other. Now, I think we're ultimately getting to a point where we recognize that our being, our essence, is reflected in our actions, and our essence is what matters because it matters in this life. And so if we take our focus off of the afterlife and we focus on this life, and we just adopt teachings of Jesus Christ, that the kingdom of heaven is actually within us, and that how we treat other people is how we treat God, and we focus on that, then Now, we don't need the idea of eternal hell and condemnation. And as a result of that, if we focus on those things and eliminate the judgment, we can produce a better way of life, a better world for all of us here. It's essentially working to transform this realm into a heaven on earth. My argument is that you cannot work to achieve a heaven on earth so long as we are divided by religious authorities and so long as we are judging each other and promoting a mentality that lacks mercy and lacks love and lacks a desire to forgive those individuals that are suffering from their ignorance of the value of true, love and selflessness and humanity. And so we're not going to get to the ideal society here on earth, a heaven on earth, until we can move beyond division and judgment. And those two things are an inherent flaw of the ongoing and seemingly never-ending religious debate. And so this is why I say I believe we are moving from an era of covenants and commandments to principles and awareness. If I look at myself as an individual and I determine that as an individual with a pulse and the ability to act in ways that are loving or harmful to others, then I recognize that's all that matters for me. That is all that matters. What I say I believe under pressure and fear of what the state of my eternal soul is, all that's irrelevant. I could say I believe, I could say all this stuff. I could be a good Catholic, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever. I could say all that. But what matters is the energy that comes forth from me. The energy is my actions. That's what matters, because that's what causes a ripple effect into the world. Not what I say I believe in terms of the nature of God and whatever prophets and figures and church fathers and texts I say I accept wholeheartedly. That has nothing to do with the ripple of how your being has an impact on the world. So as it relates to my kids, for example, I was raised with a religious background where it's focused on not going to hell and what not to do in life, the commandments, how I need to save myself. I want to teach my kids a mentality and a worldview that does not waste any energy on all that nonsense, but instead focuses solely on making the most of this life and directing your energy into positive ways, because that's how you're going to thrive in this life. That's how you're going to make the most of this life while you're here. And then when you pass away, you can be nothing other than proud of yourself. I don't want them to have any insecurity about what they think that they're supposed to proclaim that they believe about what no one knows about the nature of the afterlife. And to the degree that we might know it, we can look to near-death experiences. We can watch these documentary videos on the internet about people that end up dead and then resuscitated in a hospital, come back, and they tell their story, and the vast majority of them talk about how the only thing that matters in this life and the only thing that you take with you is your experiences with others. And you take the good, the bad, and the ugly. If you have to relive your life in what they call a life review. Now, granted, these people come back, so we don't know what happens after that life review. But what they get from that life review, through their re-experiencing of it, they feel the suffering, they feel the love, they feel the consequences of their actions. And ironically, they're told in those near-death experiences that either by God or these beings over there that we are not here to judge you. But you better believe, guess who judged them? Themselves, which is in line with the idea that the kingdom of God is within you. They judged themselves. But it wasn't through fear. It was through just the rawness of the truth of the nature of their actions and what they did with this life while they were here. And so if that is the most important thing, then I again get back to, I think that this idea that we are called to focus on religion and focus on institutionalized belief and affiliation with all of that, maybe that was the one lie amongst the 99 truths that they tell you about virtue and how to live and all this. Maybe this idea that we need to put our focus on what we say we believe rather than focusing on our actions and how we live, maybe that's a deception. It makes sense that it would be. It also makes sense that the Bible says there will be a great falling away before the end of the age. Why? Because the model that they provided us, the institutionalized religion, led to judgment, it led to war, it led to condemnation amongst ourselves, and it led to division. And if we were to have a heaven on earth, which is prophesied to come, well, then it would make sense that we would unify as a people, that we would come together in spirit and in simplicity. And in that process, we would find unity. And in my work, in my endeavor to understand the nature of reality, understand the best way to live here, and then be able to justify how I am confident that that's what matters, and that's the reason why my focus is there, and that's why I'm able to be confident in the nature of the afterlife for myself. That's why what I do has led to humanity's roar, the Raise Our Awareness revolution, because this is all about recognizing that a lot of what Jesus said is not in line with what these religions preach. They preach judgment, especially the Abrahamic faith. They preach judgment. It says, "Judge not, lest you be judged." The only way we can learn to not judge is to accept that maybe this idea of eternal torment which is unloving and unjust, maybe we got that wrong. Because if we did, I no longer have to focus on judging people. I can just focus on leading the best life. And so I think over time, over the next couple years, I think we're all going to wake up to this reality that a higher vibration worldview of love and oneness, forgiveness and mercy for those amongst us that need mercy the most, which are the people that lead terrible lives here, largely in vice and in hatred. We don't need to judge them. We're not supposed to judge them. We're supposed to serve them. We're supposed to help them. And that higher vibration mentality will lead to positive actions. And so the Bible talks about the city on seven hills being destroyed in the end times. Well, if Rome is going to be destroyed in the end times, then the question is, what does that mean? How does that play into this script? And I think when Jesus talked about founding his church upon this rock, build my church, if you look at the original translation, ecclesia in Greek means congregation. So maybe that was just another distortion and deception, this idea that the church is the institutional religion over the thousands of years. Maybe it is the people, and that when it says the people won't be destroyed, the congregation of those that live in love and follow his messages, maybe that's what won't be destroyed when it says that his church will never be destroyed. And so in these end times, understanding of the church, all of it is going to transition to a new understanding, which many people already believe and understand, but it's going to transition to a new understanding, and in that new understanding, there's going to be this simplification of our understanding of reality, simplification of what matters, which is the golden rule, which Jesus already said is the sum of the law and the prophets. We're going to evolve to a point where this division amongst churches is going to go away. We're going to respect all rituals that are where the goal of those rituals is to come in union with the spiritual realm. We don't need to be judging each other, and we don't need to be condemning each other, and that our focus needs to be on coexistence. And so, yes, we will always have physical churches, but those churches will actually become what the Catholic Church initially set out to make them, which was a universal church. And so I don't believe that we're ever going to unite humanity spiritually under any one of these religions that exist. So this is why we're creating the Raise Our Awareness Revolution, Humanity's Roar. We are graduating from sheep that blindly follow our shepherds to divine lions that recognize our divinity, recognize the responsibility that comes with that power, that the entire kingdom of God is within each and every one of us. And what comes from that is our understanding that we have missed the true purpose of this experience in this realm. And it's not about separation and judgment and division and condemnation. It's actually about living together lovingly, virtuously, according to the natural way, and with a love for God and all of creation. And so, once again, this is the Raise Our Awareness Revolution, Humanity's Roar. I'm Da Vinci the Truth. Y'all take care. God bless. Love.